Hi, everybody. Welcome to the Career Chronicles podcast. I'm Sloan, and we are joined by our wonderful guest, Liz, who I will introduce in a minute. Wanted to take a second to just welcome anybody who is joining us live. We'd love to hear from you in the comments. Post any thoughts, questions. We'll post any of them that come through to the screen and address them as we can as they come in. I know most people watch these after the fact, so we want to hear your comments and questions then too. And I won't volunteer Liz to monitor the comments, but I know I certainly go back and look at them. So we'll definitely come back and answer any questions that are prompted from our conversation today. I also wanted to take a minute before we start to always kind of give an idea of why I do this podcast and where I'm coming from. As I've said before, I have about 3 years of experience in recruiting, and I want to be a great partner to hiring managers, helping them think about the ways in which they can better recruit and retain women. And that is where the podcast was born from. I want to have conversations that are honest and authentic with women in the workplace, but also with allies of ours in the workplace, and address some of the biggest challenges and hurdles we face professionally and personally, and how the two intertwine, of course. So that's where we're coming from. We are sponsored by my wonderful team, the Spyglass Partners, which is a staffing firm that is focused on full-time and project-based hiring across IT, supply chain, and finance and accounting. So I appreciate their support and encouragement in the podcast. Without further ado, I do want to introduce our guest, Liz Martin-Strong, and we'll talk a little bit about how we got connected, but I want to tell you a little bit more about her. She has over 9 years of experience in product management and technical leadership, with a focus on application modernization and digital transformation. As a professional services director at Effectual, she oversees the delivery of high-quality products that solve customer problems and create value for the business. I love, Liz, what you also said about your core competencies. They include Agile project management, process improvement, multicultural team leadership, and customer satisfaction. I know we'll be digging in a little bit on just some of your leadership that you've had in the course of your career, and the way you've advocated for yourself and others. And just to give folks a little bit of an idea of where we're going with this conversation, we're going to be talking about addressing inequities that we've seen in the workplace. And last night I was thinking about this conversation, and I think many of us would like to say that we would step up and speak up when we see these, but when it happens in real time, it's hard. It's really hard to do. And it is much easier to say, I'm gonna stay in my lane. That's not my thing. But I know from, talking with you, you've done this a couple of times where you've noticed something that was, happening that was inequitable for you, and you've spoken up. You've done it for others. And so I'm really excited to have you on the podcast. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm just delighted to be here and to get to continue this conversation. It's one that needs to be continually revisited, and never just checked off of,
Right.
we've solved the inequity problem. Because
If we ever get to that point, I will be out of a job.
Yeah,
We'll be done.
it's manifesting in different ways. And so the more we can talk about it and the different ways you can show up and address it, even very small things make a big difference. So excited to talk more.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. So to kick us off, do you want to just briefly share how I found you, how we got connected, if you even remember? I know it was a while ago.
Yeah, it was a while ago. Chris Williams from Virtual Brown Bag, or V Brown Bag podcast, connected us, and he got connected with me through my amazing CMO at Effectual. And so I'm pretty excited that, one interview has kind of led to
Yeah.
others, because it's kind of fun to get to do these and talk about what makes a business successful, and how to continually improve.
Yeah.
So thanks, Chris, for introducing me to Sloan.
Yes, thank you, Chris. I'm very grateful as well for the connection. And I love this idea of, getting to be involved with different conversations and with different people. And that's the power of LinkedIn that I've talked about before, is just being able to share your experience, put what you've learned, put that knowledge out there. That's why I got into content creation, why I started this podcast. So Chris definitely gets that and has helped me a ton by helping connect me with great folks. So diving into what we wanted to talk about, I know that you and I have discussed your experience as a hiring manager, and I want to start there on, what you've seen, and when you've seen applicant pools of hundreds of candidates, and then they only have 2 women in them. And this is not an uncommon story. It's not even surprising to hear. I think for most people in tech, they'd be like, yeah, that tracks. So when that happens, what do you think we can do as hiring managers, and then me as your sort of recruiting partner? What can we do to increase the representation of women in our applicant pools?
Yeah. So I will say that when we talked last, I had gone through a round last summer of hiring, and I only saw two. I'm in the middle of a big hiring push right now, and I've had no ladies come across my desk. I'm really sad about it.
Yeah,
And so take everything I say with a grain of salt, because obviously some of the things we attempted to do haven't worked.
not working. Yeah.
Um, and
I appreciate
so,
that vulnerability and honesty too, because
yeah,
that's the
I
only way
mean,
we'll improve it, is just figuring out what is going
I'm
on.
just noticing.
Yeah,
I'm like, huh,
observation.
it's been a little male heavy this time around, but again, not surprising. And
Right.
so the last time we went through a big hiring push last summer, we had a different process for putting together our job descriptions. We were not consistently posting jobs places, and definitely wanted to address that, because I saw I only had two women come through for interviews, and was really disappointed, because I know there are, out of hundreds of people, there have to be more women.
Yeah.
And so we looked over how we were doing our job descriptions, and leveraged a software that now escapes me. I don't think it's Workleap, but a different one for helping analyze the job descriptions that are put together, which ones are more inclusive and have inclusive
Mhm.
language used. And that's how we've been tailoring them this time around. But sadly, I don't think it's really resulted, at least anecdotally,
Right.
in any improvements. And so I think, the next stage is going to be having to go to where, where my ladies at, and really working to connect with folks on an individual level,
Is it a
maybe
remote
through
job?
LinkedIn. Yes, the remote
Okay,
job.
so it can't even
Um,
be like, geography isn't even a
mhm.
limitation
They
here.
are highly technical roles, though. And so the
Okay.
other thing that comes to mind is, are there just not a ton of women in
In
these
that
roles with
field.
these job skills and qualifications?
I was gonna ask you
Even
that because
thinking,
I've heard that argument before when I've heard from folks that are like, well, there's just not that many women in that field. And so the pool's not going to be overly represented with women. And I'm curious, when I'm coming at it from a recruiter, I'm just analyzing, what's out there. I'm looking for candidates, but you're actually a woman in tech. What would you say to that? Is that your experience, that the women just aren't out
yes.
there?
Sadly, it is my experience, although it has shifted over
Yeah.
the almost decade that I've been in the field. I have seen more women doing second careers, third careers, moving into the career field,
Yeah.
and it's been really helpful to talk with them, do informational interviews about, here's how to make some connections and not sell yourself short when you're looking at your resume or looking at a job posting and you're like, well, I don't tick all these boxes. um, it, you don't have to tick all the boxes. No one ticks all the boxes that
Yeah.
are on a job posting. So if you're like 75% there, or you think that your experience will lend you into that really well,
Apply.
go for it. Just do it.
Yeah.
What do you have to lose?
Yeah.
Except maybe a couple hours of time going through a process. But you have nothing to lose by at least trying. I will also say that something I've noticed, so I always do some continuing education. I'm doing a data engineering boot camp in my, copious free time right now. And I have noticed there are a lot of women in that boot camp. And so that is encouraging to me,
Yeah.
because, get some retraining, go out there, go get something, and network, always be networking.
Always be
And
networking.
I
Yeah.
think that's going to be a great place for people to, like, I think of some of the people in my class now, and I'm like, okay, when we have this role, this role, and this role open
You're
or
gonna
come
pull from
available,
them.
I'm going to pull from there.
You're the kind of hiring
And so,
managers. See, this is what happens when women are in leadership is they think outside the box for hiring, and they're going to pull from these folks that are amazing and have done the training, but maybe they haven't had their first full-time professional role in that field. And so many folks aren't willing to consider that. They want to see, it'll be like entry-level job needs 2 years of experience provided. And they're like,
I have a huge problem with that.
what the
If it's
heck?
an entry level job, that means you're willing to take somebody entry level. If it's entry level pay with years of
Right.
experience, you're just looking to take advantage of somebody. And I do not
Oh,
like that. And so
yeah.
like have it be comparable.
Figure out what you
And
need this person to do
thank
and
you.
figure out, could someone not straight out of a boot camp do this? If the answer is yes, hire someone straight out of a boot camp. Like create that
Yep.
opportunity that's going to maybe create more opportunities for, as you're saying, you're anecdotally seeing more women in those boot camp classes. Create some opportunity for
Yep.
those people. It's an untapped market, I think. And I talk to people from boot camps or straight out of any educational program, and they can't find a job, and I can't really help them because I'm like, my clients aren't hiring for someone with no professional experience. And it's tough, and those of us in recruiting, we call this out. I know someone in the comments, Joseph said, just started coding at 4 years old. Problem solved. Joseph, you were way ahead of the times. What year was that? And
Way to go,
if
Joseph.
you're 4 years old, yeah, back in 1990 we were
But
coding.
Joseph, that you bring up a really good point too. And so some of my volunteer experience is working at my local high school to support their robotics program, just to
Yeah.
show like, hey, there are professionals that are women out there, or working with girls who code, or there's a summer camp through the university that's close to where I live that I support. And just showing that, getting started in something young is a great way to continue into a career field that's not super um, accessible at the moment for
Yeah.
people that are not, within the dominant framework of humans that are in those jobs right now. Totally not how I wanted to phrase that, but we're just going to roll with it. But you have a good point. Like, so encouraging young people that don't fit the typical demographic to move into that field is a great way, but doesn't solve my immediate problem today because I've got to wait for those folks to grow up.
Yes, I
So
was talking
I,
about
I
this with
think,
somebody too of like, where does the pipeline go wrong for recruiting? And he said, it starts way earlier with, middle schoolers and high schoolers. We've got to get them exposed to these fields so that they can be in the pipeline. And I'm like, that's awesome. I love where your head's at, but that is not going to address in 2024 the issue of, there are women out there in tech and we do want to get them, represented or a seat at the table, so to speak. And, you can't only
so
just be doing the pipelining with younger students. You have to be helping women currently.
I think that really lends nicely into a segue into an article that I saw Adam Grant, who is an organizational psychologist, post on LinkedIn. And it was about how work from home has kind of lessened the penalty for motherhood.
Yeah.
And that is because it allows for more flexible schedules. So I think organizations that have, remote first sort of culture are lowering the bar for or the barrier to entry, not bar, because we
Yeah.
still want high quality folks and talented people, but lowering that barrier of entry for folks to move into the career field. Because if I do not need to be synchronous with you, and my job is to do data analysis, and I'm using an example since I'm going through the boot camp,
Yeah.
um, and I need to meet a certain deliverable. Does it matter if I have to stop what I'm doing to go pick up my kids, come back, and then get back to work? No. Or I have to walk to the end of the street to meet the bus? No, doesn't
Yeah.
matter at all,
Yeah.
because my work is still getting done. I think the traditional model of butts and seats is a false idea that work is getting done. I've been very unproductive in an office setting before, and I
Yes.
was there full day.
Yeah.
Didn't get a damn thing done. But
I'm a
being at
chatty
home, I'm
person at
able to
work.
focus.
I'm like, I'm here to
I
socialize. Here's my work friends. So I'm just gonna chat all day
oh,
long. And when I'm at home, I'm like,
oh,
I need to get my work done so that when my daughter is done at 4, I can be with her and prioritize that time. But we're still seeing
yeah.
this huge push for return to work. And so it doesn't make any sense to me unless I'm looking at it from the lens of a 50 or 60-year-old man, white man, that's like, this works best for me. And it's like, okay, awesome. Have you talked to anybody else who doesn't look like you? So yeah, we
Yes.
could definitely go down that rabbit hole for sure. I know you've been in this leadership position. You're now in the hiring manager role. How has moving into management made you more inclined to speak up, or made you more comfortable to speak up when you are seeing inequities, either like the one we mentioned in the applicant pool, or maybe other inequities you're seeing as well?
Yeah, thank you for that amazing question. I think that it has shown me that I have power and I can use it to create space for people. And the reason is somebody did it for me, right? I
Yeah.
didn't just like barge on in and was like, I hold this space now. I was, the beneficiary to some space that was made for me. So early in my career, I went on site to a client meeting, and the principal at the firm was leading it, and he was advising them on social media. This is, early days of social media, right? It's transformed a lot. I hide the gray, although it's pretty fabulous, so maybe I shouldn't.
Yeah.
And he started the presentation and was like, and Liz is going to tell us about social media strategy for your account. And so I go through the deck and give our recommendations. And the customer looks at my male peer and is like, no, what do you think? And he's like, Liz just told you what we think. So, like, being very specific and direct of like, the
Yeah.
person with the knowledge is right
Right
here.
here. Yeah.
And referring back and being very direct about it. Without being rude. And so I've kind of kept that in the back of my mind as I've moved into leadership roles of that is my job, is to make sure that my qualified people can be heard,
Yeah.
and that they are able to share their expertise. And so I want to say about 9 months ago, I was on site with a customer and large firm, and we were going through a whiteboarding session, and mostly men. There were two other women in the room, which I was stoked about. And one of them was actually subject matter expert. And she continually got talked over. And I was like, not having this. Stepped in, was like, she will answer your questions if you stop interrupting her.
Yeah.
Was very direct with that person, and then followed up with their boss after and was just like, hey, that's not okay. You
Yeah.
have hired us to be experts here. And so I need you to help make sure that your staff provides the space for our people to give that expertise that you've asked for. And could that have gotten me in trouble as an individual contributor? Probably. I probably would have been very uncomfortable to say that. But my job is to make sure my people are set up for success and can do their best work. And so
Yeah.
if they're getting talked over, that's my problem, not theirs.
Yeah.
And so really making sure that I am positioning that person to share their expertise and knowledge and the reason that they are at the table.
Yeah.
So I think that's a way of just like paying it forward.
Yeah.
I also have had a ton of amazing allies and folks that have been like, we need more people like you in
We
positions of
do.
leadership. How do we make that happen?
Yeah.
And so my CTO currently is pretty passionate about that, and has done a lot of mentoring and coaching for folks that are non-traditional leadership to move into different positions along those lines. So continuing a dialogue for him or with him to make sure that we think about how to have an inclusive and diverse workforce for the services that I deliver at my day job. So I think using the power that you are able to gain, but also
That's what I was
making
gonna
sure
say.
that you pay it forward
Yeah.
and find those bright spots and help give them the information they need to do what you need done. So if
Yeah.
I need a specific thing done, I know who I'm going to go pitch. I'm going to go pitch my CTO on how to make sure that we have more women coming in the pipeline. Because if you have that champion at that level, it's it's a little bit easier sometimes when you're coming up from, grassroots and you've got somebody at the top that's also confirming that message and everybody meets in the middle. Makes it a bit of an easier sell.
Yeah. Well, I think what you've done as a reflection is important. The fact that you've reflected on who helped me get to where I am today and what did that look like? What kind of stepping in or having your back, what did that look like? And how can I do that for others? I think that's so important because, like you said, you're paying it forward and creating those opportunities for people. I'm sure it would be easy, in a manager's seat to just say, I could get this done myself, knock it out. But rather, you're giving the opportunity to whoever the subject matter expert is on your team and backing them up in a room where maybe they're not being treated with the respect that they should be. So I think that's excellent. And I think I want to dig in on your example a little further of when you did back up your female colleague who was the subject matter expert and was being talked over. That was an opportunity there was a lot at stake. Like I imagine that was a client of yours that you were in the room with. And when you spoke up, was there any thoughts running through your head of like, what if I lose this client by speaking up in this way? Was that on your mind at all? Or were you just like,
No,
I've just got to get
we wouldn't lose that. You're really giving me a lot of credit for how much sway I have. I don't think we'd lose the client because I irritated somebody. I think if anything, I'd get pulled off of the account for making somebody super angry. But
yeah,
I've made customers upset before by standing up and kind of pushing back in a respectful manner that they were like, I don't like that. And my team's always backed me up. So
good.
having that experience tells me that if I do it again, I'm still going to have my company backing me up and supporting me. And that's part of why I mentioned like making sure folks in higher up the chain than me are supportive of, what I am doing and believe in my expertise and leadership because that makes me feel safe.
My dog is very excited about this topic, as you can probably
I know,
tell.
and I appreciate his support so very much.
Woo! And he is just really going to town, probably getting some sort of package. But I think that's awesome that you have that support. You have people that are, that you feel safe and comfortable speaking up for people. Because that was the first thought that came through my mind is, I've heard from other individuals that there is a risk when you speak up. There is a risk when you address inequity. It's the same risk that I've talked about with women about what if I negotiate this job offer, will they rescind it? And it's like, no, I don't think they can. I don't think they will. But, there's these worries, for women and for other groups that are underrepresented. It feels like there's a lot at stake here. If I speak up, if I advocate for myself, what do I stand to lose? And for some people, they could stand to lose a lot and they might not always be in a safe environment. Like it sounds like you were very grateful to have that safe environment where your company has your back and knows your value and supports you.
I am. And it's kind of across the board. So I have another example of where I pushed back on a customer that was being less than collaborative and
less collaborative is a lovely way of putting it.
And welcoming and actually asked for me to be removed. Is my my team was just like, oh my gosh, can we get this guy out of here? Like, that's not somebody we want to work with.
No.
And that made me feel so valued. Because, it would be very easy to be like, well, obviously Liz has terrible customer service skills and that's why this customer is irritated. No, that customer was a machismo EOS. And like, just because you're a customer,
we don't want to do business with
be a jerk. Yeah. So, I mean, there were other issues with that particular customer, but I did stand up for my team in that instance, and it did not go well. And my company had my back, and they were like, "Nope, you didn't do anything wrong. You were protecting our team. You were making sure we were able to deliver the services we've been hired to deliver.
Yeah,
you didn't do anything wrong. That guy's just a jerk." And so I think that's another thing that's important to have culturally in a business. But I do want to touch on something that made my like little neck hairs bristle, but is folks feeling like they can't negotiate.
Yeah.
Y'all, it's a two-way interview. If they
Yeah.
rescind an offer, which I don't even know if they can, but if
I
they
don't know if they
rescind an
can
offer
either. If we can
because
get some lawyers in here to tell us what's legal, some
that'd be
HR
great.
folks, please chime in. We need to know.
Also, but if they're going to rescind an offer because you asked for what you want, you don't want to work there anyway. Move on.
Right,
Let
but
it
there are
go.
some people
They're
that
not
have to
right
have
for
a
you.
job. They're like, I gotta pay the bills. And I'm like, I can't even, I was, this came up with one of my friends in my network who was getting her first job back after having two kids. And, money was getting tight for her family. And it's like, I gotta take this job. And I was like, I think you should negotiate, based on what you were hoping to see. Tell them, why you add value. You give them their whole spiel. And I've
Hmm.
gone into that and on different podcasts on how to negotiate. And she said, but what if they take back this offer? I can hear the fear in her voice of like, I've got kids to feed, I've got
Yeah.
bills to pay. This isn't a luxury of like, I'm entertaining three different offers and I'm already in it. I'm already employed. She's unemployed, coming off maternity leave, 4 months postpartum. I'm like, yeah, that, and I'm like, am I giving her bad advice? Like, what if, like, I'm not a
No,
lawyer. What if
you're
they
not giving
do?
her bad
Like,
advice.
she did negotiate. She did get a bump, and that one turned out amazing. So it usually works out, I think, or they just say no. I've never heard of a rescind of an offer, but I don't know. It's scary.
Yeah. I have had quite a few friends either get laid off or move into the job market because of rounds of layoffs in tech.
Yeah,
And they're like, oh gosh, I feel so underqualified and inadequate. And these are people with like 10 plus years of experience in their field. They've managed teams of people. And I was like,
yeah.
you feel
Like, how do
underqualified? Are
you
you
feel about
kidding
it?
me?
Yeah,
Yeah, I'm like, if I had a role with your skills, I would hire you today. We wouldn't even
yeah,
open it. We'd just be like, got one, here we go.
yeah.
But unfortunately, can't do that every time.
No.
And so this may make me sound like a man hater, but I told my friends, like, roll into that interview with all the confidence of a mediocre white man. Like those guys, there is a product there to bottle that confidence and spread it about.
Yeah,
Because oh my gosh, like somebody that's like, I meet 25% of the
I can do this.
requirements on this and I've still applied. Like I want some of that confidence because I'm not even close to that threshold. But take a little bit of that and say, okay, I've got 75%, I've got 80%, I'm going to go for it. And then just own it. And if somebody's like, well, you have this gap. Yeah, I do. I haven't been given the opportunity to grow in that direction yet, but I have all of this other experience or all of this applicable, transferable experience to go into that role. So, something that I think people that are doing a career change often are really nervous about, at least the ones I've talked to, you've talked to way more people,
Yeah,
is just like, well, I don't have skills in X. Like, yeah, but
yep,
you've worked with the general public. Do
yep,
you know how challenging the general public is? Ew.
yeah.
You can handle the most difficult customer
Teachers,
if you
people
can
who've
handle.
taught, they can do anything.
Exactly. Have you handled angry parents? You can handle a irritated customer, let me
Yeah,
tell you, or a grumpy engineer. You can do that because they ain't got nothing on an angry parent.
yeah,
uh,
literally.
so just wanted to encourage that and share that feedback and just like do it, go try.
Yeah,
Just put yourself out there and you may be surprised with the results. Also, it's hard. It is
it's
hard.
hard.
Not going to
That's what I want to
sugarcoat it.
recognize it. Yeah, it's hard. It's hard to it's it's hard to bet on yourself and to have that confidence if you've never had the experience of it working out before, or if you've never
Hmm.
taken that step before. It can be very hard. And I'm here to support anybody who's trying to go through that. I will hype you up. I'll try to give you the confidence of a mediocre white man. We'll work on that together. So I would
Feels
love
so
to.
not PC to say, but I just love it so
I'm saying it. I have many white men that I have in my network that would fully support it and they would be behind it.
much.
Joseph actually, he's one of them, not a mediocre white man, just a white man that I adore. But he said, what is some advice for the best way to support and be an ally to those who are underrepresented, especially in the context of this conversation of,
Oh
hiring?
gosh. So I don't know the best way. I can just tell you what I've tried.
Yeah.
And so we talked at the beginning of our conversation about the applicant pool and having only two women come through it. One was very much qualified for the job that I was hiring for. The other one wasn't. And the one that wasn't, I made her go through the interview process anyway. And the reason was, it was afterwards, we sent her a ton of feedback of, hey,
Ooh.
next time you apply for this job, here's what you need to hit on. Here's
Ooh.
what you can do to be successful. And just, I don't know,
I wish more people
going
did
above and
that because I
beyond.
don't know that that's the norm. I hear of people, it seems to be the norm is getting ghosted, getting zero feedback, getting a standard rejection email. So to answer Joseph's question, one of the best ways to be an ally to, anybody who's a job seeker, but to those folks that are maybe underrepresented in that job field, is to provide feedback,
Mhm.
kindly but honestly. And I think
Yes.
Jeremy and I talked about that last week of delivering feedback. And you can deliver constructive criticism in a kind and empathetic way and come from it in a way that's helpful for people.
What I did, because I did the first round interview with this person, I was like, still going to move them through the technical. Why? Because they need exposure to
They
technical
need
interviews.
practice. Yeah. If you've never, I
Yes.
mean, that's a huge hurdle. Is our
So
whole hiring system is set up to whoever's best at interviewing gets the job. They may not even be the best at the actual role, but they're the best at displaying their skills in an interview, whatever that might look like.
I ended up coaching the person that did the technical interview. I was like, this person is not qualified for this job. However, they clearly have transitioned into this career.
Mhm.
Can you give them some feedback on the call as you go through the interview and really help them understand why you're asking these questions and what exactly you're looking for? And
Mhm.
again, great example of having somebody on my team and in my organization that was like, absolutely, I will absolutely do that because I want to see more people like this come through. And
Yeah.
if we don't start making an effort
You'll
to
never
do
see more
that,
of those
they
people.
won't.
No.
They won't come through. And so I think that that is, that's something small that I've been able to do. Is that scalable? No. Is it solving the problem? No. Did I help one person? I sure hope so.
Yeah.
I sure tried. So that's something that you can do to help support people that are underrepresented. There are also job boards that are specific to getting more women into tech. And so Power to Fly is one that I use myself when I'm in times of transition. And they often have businesses that are making a very concerted effort to have more inclusive and diversity within their workforce. And so they'll post there. I don't know how that, complies with all of uh, legal things and needs. I'm sure it does because it's been around for quite a few years. But there are job boards that are available to help attract different groups of people and lower that barrier to entry and that bar for folks to cross to even get in the door.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Yeah, I think what you're saying is, to answer Joseph's question on a broader scale, is just to be aware of people's different perspectives and, to the best of your ability, try to keep those in mind when you're designing different structures around hiring and making sure that, how would someone from XYZ background, how might this look different for them in practice than it does for someone who looks like me? And I think being willing to alter your process, create opportunities for people, make exceptions. That's going to create the most representation for people. And I think that's what you've done in your example, Liz. It's awesome.
Yeah. The other thing that I think you can do that's very small is we work in tech. I work in tech. And there are some very strong personalities that can be borderline bullying at times. And if I see that on a meeting, I shut it down immediately. And I talk to the person on the side. I've put people on PIPs that were not wrong. They were absolutely right. But being right doesn't mean you get to be an asshole. You still have to be collaborative. You still have to
Yeah.
listen to other ideas. And so there have been plenty of times where I have shut that down. And the goal of doing that is one, I don't like that in my organization. And two, it's creating a safe space for people to collaborate and to speak up and to actually step in and say something of like, yeah, I know you're the smartest person in the room. You are the subject matter expert, but there are other ideas that are going to make the solution richer in the long term by listening. And so making sure that that space is there and that those diverse perspectives and ideas can be heard is another very small thing anybody that is in management or leadership, or even if you're just the lead on a project, can do to set the tone.
It's small but important, for sure. And Chris, by the way, showed up. He said, if you say my name 3 times, I show up like Beetlejuice. So he is here with us.
Hi, Chris.
Hi, Chris. Thanks for joining us. We appreciate it. Liz, I know we're close to our allotted time. I usually try to stick around a half hour. I know we haven't even gotten to talk about pay equity as much. I know we talked about a little bit about negotiating at the offer stage. You know, is there anything that you want to share about your experience first observing pay inequity and then, you know, addressing it? Because I do think this is a really important topic that I wanted to hit today. So I'm fine going over if you are.
I'm free for about another 15, 20 minutes. So I'm great going over. And this is something near and dear to my heart.
Yeah.
Again, the first time I really became aware of pay inequity was it was brought to my attention by a peer. And we were both at the same level. This person was in overseeing finance and saw on just payroll. He was like, WTF, why do you make half what I make? And so armed me with that information and was like, you need to go ask for a raise now. And so I did. And it was very uncomfortable in negotiation. And I am forever indebted to that person for calling out that existed.
Yeah.
And, you know, there was no difference in the qualifications required for our job description. And didn't have that much more experience than I did, but I wasn't even in the same range. We weren't even in the same like pay bracket. So if it was based on experience, I would expect like this person has a bit more experience than me. They're a little further in that range than where I was. That would have been fine. But to have such a disparity was absolutely unacceptable. And I really cannot thank that person enough. Actually, every time I see him, I thank him. So there's that's very uncomfortable to go in and say, why can't I be in this range?
Yeah.
What qualification am I missing? And why isn't that in the job description? Because it's very combative. I was like, I'm getting fired today when I went in for it. But you know what?
I love that you
at that point
anyways,
in my career,
like, who cares? Let's do it.
I'm like, you know what do I have to lose? If I don't speak up for me, no one will. And so I went and had that uncomfortable conversation. A bit later in my career, because of that experience, when I was moved into a different leadership role, so I was given a promotion, I asked for the pay range of people in my role.
Yeah.
And I went and I asked HR for that. And I was very clear to HR about why I wanted that information.
How did you find the HR person to ask? Is for people who are in this job search process, you're meeting with a hiring manager potentially.
Oh, it was internal. So I just went to
you were already working for that company. You were in.
Yes.
Okay. I got you. Okay.
Yep. I already worked there. And so I went to HR and I'm like, hey, I'm paranoid about this phenomenon that I have experienced. And it makes me extremely uncomfortable. Can you give me the range of folks in my role? I understand you can't tell me what my peers make. I get that. Right. But I do need to know, like, am I even in the ballpark? And it was very helpful to start that conversation because one, it was a sign like, hey, we're paying attention. Folks in the trenches are paying attention. And it helps me see that my HR team had our employees' best interests at heart along with the business, right? And that's a delicate balance.
Yeah.
And so Chris makes a really good point that a lack of pay transparency in the US only benefits the business, never the employees. Yeah. And I will say it hurts the business if you're not transparent about it, because you have people that don't have the right expectations you're trying to hire, and just share information. There's nothing wrong with that. And have a mechanism that if somebody is internal and wants to go to for something with a different pay range, that you're able to accommodate that,
Yeah.
and have a process to go through for getting people there. So those are things that I've done. I realize and acknowledge that both were risky. They were extremely risky. I was much younger and earlier in my career when I went and was like, basically, like, hey, this isn't okay.
This is not okay.
And I didn't have as much at stake, right? So I didn't have a family to support. I didn't have, a mortgage to pay. It was just me in my little apartment, right? So I was like, what do I have to lose? I could work at Starbucks again if I need to. Not a big deal. Also, those healthcare benefits, for that type
Starbucks?
of,
Or are you saying it?
they are known for their
Wow.
very generous benefits package.
Okay.
For even folks in the store. So don't know if that has changed since that was my backup plan, but it's been a backup plan for a long time. I'm like, well, at least I can get healthcare covered. So definitely want to say that, and I'm sure my friend at Starbucks will be like, Liz, we don't talk about that anymore. No, I'm kidding. She'll appreciate it.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate
so
that.
those
Yeah,
experiences.
the experience. And when you mentioned that to me that you did that, I was like, people need to hear that it can be done and that you should speak up for yourself. And you should be that person that pointed it out to you, the person that says, hey, this is not okay. And I want to make sure you're aware that there's a pay inequity happening, because without that information, you would have never known. You would have been continued to be left in the dark. And so being that person that's vocal about it is so important. It's important that we have those allies to help us in that.
Yeah, I do want to make clear it was not a small difference. It was
Yeah,
like a
doesn't sound like it.
substantial
Yeah,
difference. Like made twice what I was making at the time. So
enough to
that's
catch that guy's eye and be like,
yes.
whoa, like as he's going over the payroll, enough to draw his attention to it, be like, what the heck is happening here?
And so I definitely want to make clear, like, if it's a few $1,000 difference, you're in a range, right?
Yes, ranges are real.
Ranges are real. There's nothing wrong with the range. There's nothing wrong with being at one end or the other and having a plan to move up to it.
Yeah.
But when you're not even in the range,
bracket, yeah, the brackets.
that's the problem. And so those are the things that I really hope more people are thoughtful about, and that we get, again, this was almost 10 years ago. So a lot has changed as well. So pay transparency is starting to become a requirement for job postings. In some states. And so I will say that there are some positive things that are happening that hopefully prevent the situation that I was in. But still, if you see it, say something, because there's no way to change the culture if we're going to tolerate some of that behavior.
Yeah, this is something we have to think about on the back end as recruiters too. When we're sending candidates over to clients, first and foremost, we have to make sure the client understands their range. Sometimes the range changes based on who they end up seeing in the candidate pool. And once it does, we have to be clear on those parameters and communicate those to candidates and advocate to candidates that, here's what I'm seeing, someone with your same level of experience is actually asking for this. So like, I'm happy to put you in play at that number. So that's something that, I try to always be doing, that delicate balance of serving my client, but also serving my candidates. And that's all any of us can do, is just try to be honest and transparent. I'm all about honesty.
Yeah.
And information.
Well, and shameless plug, if I can, I work at a company called Effectual Inc. We do cloud and IT services for very large companies. We are hiring a ton of technical roles, DevOps engineers, software engineers, ladies, gentlemen,
let's do it.
Non-binary people, please apply.
Yeah.
We want to.
It sounds like a great place to work. They have really had it seems like they've taken intentional steps to make it a place where you feel comfortable speaking up, you feel supported. So that's the kind of place most people that I talk to, they want to work. So
yeah, and if you're lucky, you get to interview with me. So come on, send your stuff in. We want to see you. So
I love it.
thank you, Sloan, for creating this opportunity, and I hope I don't get you in trouble by plugging go direct on my job board.
Yeah, no, go. Let's talk. We'll talk afterwards, Liz, about you working with me as a recruiter. We'll make that happen. So no worries. I love when people want to share their organization because it's a great place to work. That's awesome. Like I want to plug those organizations. I want to figure out what are those organizations that are actually amazing cultures. So it sounds like Effectual is that. So happy to plug it here. Before we wrap up, Liz, I know I promised to ask all of my guests, when or where have you felt most empowered as a woman? Have you thought about this?
It's been a while. I'm kidding. It hasn't been that long. I think it was actually at AWS reInvent this past year. And I don't know how I got invited, but I got invited, and I hope I get invited again to like Women in Leadership Luncheon. And it was
I love
one
it.
of the most transformative experiences. I walked out of there like, I will change
Rule
the
the world.
world. And it was just women that happened to be at the AWS conference to begin with. The CEO of Amazon Web Services spoke. Like that person taking time out of their day to speak to that room, it just speaks
Speaks
volumes
words,
to
yeah.
how important it was to have that luncheon and to look through that room and see such diversity in terms of walks of life, and backgrounds. And it was so energizing, and to get to sit at a table with such smart people, hardworking, talented individuals, I left there feeling like I could do anything.
I love
So
it.
creating more spaces where folks can get that experience, I think, is fantastic. And even before that, I did a local tech event right when I was trying to transition into tech. And I still am in contact with and friends with some of the women that I was on a panel with at that time. And so, I joke with a friend that works for local government. She's like, so and so? I'm like, there are only so many women in tech in our small community. We all know each other.
I love
Uh,
it.
and we definitely help lift each other up in one way or another. So creating both a virtual community through your forum and platform,
Yeah.
and having local ones as well and in person is just so powerful.
It is. I completely agree. Well, thank you for your time and for going long. I think what I wanted you to share, I think was so important for people to hear. So I appreciate you and your time. And we'll have you back again down the road at some point if you're willing to join us again. I know there's more things that we can talk about. Thanks to Chris and Joseph for joining us in the chat. Thanks to Chris for
Chris Williams.
Chris
Thank
Williams.
you.
Chris Williams, thanks for introducing me to Liz. You're awesome, Chris Williams. Awesome, awesome, awesome. Well, thank you guys for joining us. We'll see you next time. Everybody take care.